Good evening from New York. The Republican Party was born in 1854. They won the Civil War and... well, they won the Civil War. But in our fifth story tonight, today we know that the Republican Party, the grand old party of old, has been subsumed, heart and mind, by its most radical wing, the Tea Party. A new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll finding that 71%, well over two-thirds of American Republicans, now have either a favorable image of the party's Tea Party wing and or hope that Tea Party candidates win in November. It is, in less than 2 years, a remarkable demise for a party that once upheld and advocated values now so proudly shunned and disdained by the Tea Party, as witnessed over and over in news stories from just the past 24 hours or so. As recently as the Bush administration, Republican operative Karl Rove and President Bush hoped to build a permanent Republican majority by winning over Hispanic voters. Nevada Republican Tea Party Senate candidate Sharon Angle, however, has been running a campaign ad demonizing illegal immigrants, demonizing them in such offensive fashion that her own occasional spokesperson, T.B. Ellis, chairwoman of the Nevada Republican Hispanic Caucus, went public on Monday, condemning the ad. Quote, "I condemn this type of propaganda, no matter who is running them, where they blame Mexicans as the only problem and where they attack them as the only source of illegal immigration." Angle's campaign not responding to the Las Vegas Sun's request for comment on that. Republicans have also historically stood for English only, enshrined in law and practice to facilitate immigrant assimilation. Florida Republican Tea Party gubernatorial candidate Marco Rubio even campaigned on that point, Senate campaign point, excuse me. But now he's reaching out to Florida's Spanish-speaking voters by doing this.
Por las acciones de algunos políticos en Washington. Soy Marco Rubio y apruebo este mensaje.
Republicans also used to stand, our younger voters might even remember this, for intellectual elitism. Republican Party leaders wrote their own books and stuff. They looked down on those who would challenge the prevailing canons of literature and history. So when we learned about Delaware Republican Tea Party Senate candidate Christine O'Donnell's time at Princeton and Oxford, it seemed a throwback to a Republican Party that valued academic excellence. But with a spate of reporting on it in just the past couple of days, we're going to have a better picture of her academic history. No, despite years of claiming otherwise, O'Donnell only graduated from college this month. No, despite her lawsuit suggesting otherwise, she did not take any graduate courses at Princeton. No, despite her online bio page, she got a Lincoln Fellowship from the Claremont Institute, not a graduate fellowship. And no, despite a LinkedIn page she only disavowed today, despite being asked about it Friday by the Plumline blog, it was the right-wing Claremont Institute, not Claremont Graduate University, and it was a course taught by something called the Phoenix Institute in space on the Oxford campus that she took, not an Oxford University course. Of course, moral rectitude, honesty, was only a Republican value back when supporting the troops still was. Sharon Angle, again, claiming Saturday in audio posted yesterday by the Las Vegas Sun that she never supported privatizing Veterans Affairs care for America's veterans, explaining she was just talking about the care her own dad gets.
He has served this country, and yet he pays $800 a month in prescription drugs that are not covered by the VA and they're not covered by Medicare. And there's a lot of you that understand what I'm saying. And that was the context of those comments. I said that they could do a better job. That's all I said. The VA could do a better job for our veterans.
All the Republican candidates said was the VA could do a better job. Nothing about privatizing. No, that was the Tea Party candidate, and just this past May.
He's needing more and more supervised care. He's 87 years old and has Parkinson's, and we're having to pay more and more for his health care. I know he pays over $800 a month in prescription drugs that we can't get through his VA nor through Medicare. They just won't cover those things. And I know lots of seniors.
Should they cover those things?
No, not if you're working toward a privatized system.
Of course, moral rectitude used to be even more important to the Republican Party on fiscal matters. This was the party of the grown-ups, the party that knew how to balance its books. Alaska Republican Tea Party candidate, the Senate candidate, Joe Miller, has failed to file his personal finance disclosures as required by law, Think Progress reports. He was supposed to do so last spring or face a $50,000 fine. He has yet to file. Of course, when it comes to moral rectitude, nothing was more important to Republicans, the Law and Order Party, than law and order. New York Republican Tea Party gubernatorial candidate Carl Palladino has a campaign apparently full of convicted criminals, accused criminals, and other question marks. The New York Times reported an indicted advisor, campaign chairwoman, accused of funneling public funds away from the public, and the Tea Party organizer who got him into this race, a hit-and-run drunken driver, did jail time. Palladino's campaign manager telling the Times Palladino knows all about them. This is a campaign of junkyard dogs. This from a campaign pledging to take out the trash. The quote from a campaign manager who had himself failed to pay $53,000 in taxes. And then there was the traditional Republican respect for authority, especially respect for the office of president. Meet the Maine Republican Tea Party gubernatorial candidate, Paul LePage.
As your governor, you're going to be seeing a lot of me on the front page saying, Governor LePage tells Obama to go to hell.
The driving force behind the new Republican Tea Party candidates, Senator Jim DeMint, who is now virtually in open warfare with the last dying remnants of the Grand Old Party's Grand Old Guard. In a mailing last week, he blasted them for supporting Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski, even after Murkowski lost her primary to Joe Miller. The Old Guard replying in stunningly public fashion. I would take issue with that. A mistaken idea. Very counterproductive. Totally inaccurate. Helpful to Republicans? No. Disappointed. Makes it hard for us to be a team. Not if you signed on with the new team. Let's bring in a member of our team, MSNBC political analyst Howard Fineman, Newsweek's senior Washington correspondent and political columnist, soon to make his home at the Huffington Post. Howard, good evening.
Hi, Keith.
This new poll, 71% of Republicans to some degree or another on board with the Tea Party. Does the figure deserve some nuancing, or is it just about right as an overall barometer?
No, I think it's pretty close, but Frank Luntz, the Republican pollster who was with Newt Gingrich in the old days of the contract with America in the 90s, told me that it probably does need to be unpacked a bit. There are a lot more Tea Party people who come into the Republican Party. That's one reason the number's where it is. But he cautioned me to note that just because even Republicans might say they have a favorable view of the Tea Party doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to vote for Tea Party candidates in specific places, like Alaska, where, according to a new poll in Time magazine, Lisa Murkowski is running neck and neck with Joe Miller, the Tea Party candidate. And maybe not in Nevada, where Sharon Engel is really out there, and maybe not in Delaware, where same with Christine O'Donnell. So you have to look at it a little more closely.
The younger viewers, as we suggested, might not remember the Republican Party that we described, but it really was, as just that brief videotape clip of William F. Buckley suggested, it really was a different beast than what we have today, correct?
No, it definitely was. And if you can go back in time a little bit, if you permit me, Teddy Roosevelt was the prototypical progressive. And then even Richard Nixon was in favor of national health care and established the Environmental Protection Agency. Ronald Reagan made a deal with Tip O'Neill essentially to save Social Security for a generation. George H.W. Bush raised taxes to help try to balance the budget. Even George W., as you pointed out, was for immigration reform. So these were all Republicans who wanted to contribute to the discussion and who wanted, they thought, to make government run better, not to run away from government.
And that raises, I guess, let's get to that overall point here right now. What happens if enough of the Tea Partiers do well enough to shift the balance toward them, not just on the stump, but in Congress? How does what is truly an anti-government concept, a group of anti-government people, govern?
Well, with great difficulty, if not impossible. I covered Newt Gingrich when he ran the Newt Revolution in 1994, and the old Newt Gingrich looks like Nelson Rockefeller compared to this crowd. And Newt couldn't do it. Newt was much better as an attack guy, trying to pull down the Democratic hierarchy of that day, than he was as a manager and an inside guy. And he really, in the end, couldn't do it. There were all kinds of coups and counter coups, because when the purists get in, they're more interested in purism than purist thinking than they are in cutting deals and running government. I think it'll be very difficult. And this is really kind of too bad, Keith, because we need this kind of argument in the country constantly about the role of government. Mm-hmm. But you have to have people who believe enough in government to make that possible. A rejectionist front doesn't work. And I blame for this collapse of the conversation people like John McCain, who was, after all, the Republican standard bearer against Barack Obama. He went totally over to the Tea Party side to get the nomination in his state. You ran a list of Republican senators there who were, objecting to Jim DeMint. I didn't see Mitch McConnell in there, the Republican leader, and the reason you didn't see Mitch McConnell is he had the pants scared off him by Rand Paul, who won the nomination in Kentucky for the Senate against McConnell himself. So the people who in an earlier time and generation would step forward to try to be the adults in the Republican Party are too scared to do so in many cases.
And getting even more meta here for a second, there used to be something else at work in the parties and among the voters, and it seems utterly absent in this, at least in this cycle, and that would be the word shame. Here in New York, Mr. Palladino's campaign actually is portraying this criminal, scandalous past of its top personnel as a badge of honor. And at the risk of sounding like a Republican of old, where's the outrage?
Well, I got to say, Keith, New York is New York, so it's a little bit of a special case. And he's up against Andrew Cuomo, who's a tough customer himself. So there's a little bit of street bravado going on both sides. But I think more generally, a lot of Republican voters, a lot of conservatives are in the mood to say, we will reach for any weapon we can, any candidate we can, to send the message we want to send. There's almost no other way to explain Christine O'Donnell in Delaware, or Sharon Engel in Nevada, or Joe Miller in Alaska. And the question will be, and is right now in these remaining weeks, whether those people are ones that in the end these very Tea Party people and Republicans will end up voting for and turning out for or not. It remains to be seen, because there's still a lot of time to look at those people between now and November 2nd.
MSNBC political analyst Howard Fineman, as always, great thanks for your time tonight, Howard.
Thank you, Keith.